and get live. All right, we are now live. The date is March 9th, 2023. It is 11:46 a.m. And we are now convening the meeting of the Election Law Subcommittee. I believe we have 3 bills to consider this morning, and I'm going to start with HB 410, the Election Reform Act of 2023. As this bill came in, it did a lot of things, but in terms of the bill as amended, you should have that reprint in front of you. And as amended, the bill ensures that local boards maintain a contact list of individuals and organizations who'd like to be notified about local board meetings when proposed changes are going to be discussed. It enables individuals and organizations to register for the contact list. That includes also key elected officials, such as a mayor, county executive, us, members of General Assembly that represent the district where a change might be made. And to change the location of a polling place, the local board has to hold a meeting to discuss the change and provide an opportunity for interested individuals and organizations to testify on the proposed change at the meeting. It also requires a meeting notice that the individuals that I just mentioned who are on the contact list are notified at least 14 days that the meeting is advertised. Also, 6 months before each statewide primary, each local board has to submit a polling place plan for SBE to approve. And they may not, the local boards may not reduce a total number of separate buildings used as polling places by less than 5% than in the 2018 general. In terms of the polling plan, it has to include a map that shows the precinct boundaries and the location of each polling place. If there are reductions, they have to address and describe the location of each polling place, demographic information, the impact of the change based on the demographics, and information on the voters who cast ballots in the most 3 recent elections. And the State Board of Elections has to approve these polling place plans. Stan, is there anything else in the current amendments that were provided in the reprint that you'd like to mention?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think just to clarify that the local boards may not reduce the number of polling places or number of separate buildings used as polling places below more than 5% below the level of 2018. Just to clarify that. The state board can only approve a polling place plan if they find that it complies with the current law, and also that it will not have a disenfranchising impact on historically disadvantaged communities. And then the other thing is that the amendments do remove the provisions of the bill having to do with the Public Information Act and denying Public Information Act requests during the election. There's already authority under current law in the Public Information Act that allows a custodian to deny inspection of a record and go to court to get a record, to get an order allowing for denial of inspection if it would harm the public interest.
All right. Any questions on, I know that we're going to have another amendment, but we're going to do this set of amendments first. Any questions? This bill basically is making sure that we maintain our polling locations, and if there is interest in changing them, that we're looking at what the impact would be and that there's community and voter engagement around that.
Madam Chair, I just had one other thing I forgot to add, if it's okay.
Sure.
So also there's the provision that was in the bill originally that's still there under the amendments. It just says basically that you can't use fraud, menace, threat, intimidation, bribery, reward, or offer of reward to influence a voter's decision whether to vote by any lawful means. Currently, it just says whether to go to the polls to vote. This bill just expands it, so if a person chooses to vote by mail, you also couldn't use those unlawful means to influence their decision whether to vote that way.
Thank you. Adding that to my notes. Great. Is there any discussion around this bill as amended with the amendments? Okay. I know that Common Cause had some questions, but I see they're still connected to audio. So I don't think we're gonna be able to discuss their questions. All right. I would like to entertain a motion on this set of amendments.
Move the amendment.
Second.
All right, did I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, perfect. It's been moved and properly second, the amendments to HB 410. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of HB 410 as amended with this set of all of those in favor of these amendments to HB 410, please raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? All right, we are on HB 410 as amended with these with this first set of amendments. I think we do have another amendment from Delegate Attar on this bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have two amendments that you should have received. The first one just adds myself and Delegate Cardin as co-sponsors to the bill. And then what the second one does is currently the primary election date falls out on the first day of Passover, and that restricts many people from being able to vote. So this changes the election date just for 2024 to the second Tuesday in May, and that way it does not conflict with any holidays. And with that, I move the amendments.
Second.
Thank you, Delegate. To make sure everyone has it, what would the new date of the election be?
May 14th,
May 14th for June, for
2020.
2024.
Yes.
All right. Sorry, did someone make a motion? I don't know if I missed that.
Delegate Attar made the motion and I seconded.
Okay, got it. Thank you. All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any other discussion regarding moving the election date to May 14th and adding these two co-sponsors to the bill? All right, seeing none, this amendment has been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, we are on HB 410 as amended with these sets of amendments. Do I have a motion?
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, HB 410 favorable as amended. Further discussion? Seeing none on the bill, all those in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? All right, unanimous. HB 410 as amended has been voted out favorably from our subcommittee. Wonderful. Now moving on to HB 742. This is the bill about basically the local central committees and ensuring that an individual may not be a candidate or hold party office as well as elected public offices. This is going to, this is a bill that we've passed once or twice before, and it really looks at the fact that in some areas, people are serving on the central committee as elected on the central committee or appointed to the central committee, and also holding state office or other offices, and this would prohibit that. And Stan, this would prohibit it from any other public office, not just us in the General Assembly, right?
That's correct, yes.
Yes. And of course, as everyone knows, you can't serve in two public offices anyway. Like I can't be a school board member and a legislator or a city council member and a legislator. This is making sure that we are also looking at the central committee offices as well. Delegate Griffith has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern with this is obviously with two public offices, but do we consider central committee offices public offices or party offices? Because I do believe there's a distinction there. And the concern is, and I can't speak to obviously the Democratic Central Committee, but the Republican Central Committee, sometimes there is a limited number of individuals who do want to be active and involved. So for us, there is a need to sometimes have people serve in the party as well as an elective office. We see that quite a bit on our side of the aisle. So that's an additional concern. related to that. So could somebody speak to the difference between a party office and a state office? Because I do believe there may be two different things there.
Yes, Delegate Griffith, they are different, as you say, but the point of the bill is actually to say that you can't serve simultaneously in a public office and a party office. So the bill would change the current practice in that way.
Again, just for what it's worth, you know, that's my concern and my opposition, just because, you know, in our two-party system, the concerns on our side are very different than concerns on the Democrat side, I would imagine, and ours is a staffing issue, for lack of a better term. So just want to share my concerns on how it affected my party.
That's certainly understood and appreciated, Delegate Griffith. We know it can sometimes be hard to find people to serve in these roles, especially at the hyper local level, like a party office. So that's definitely understood and appreciated. Delegate Attar and then Delegate Fair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the people who are currently, I know there are some people who are currently in this position. Is it retroactive, or would they'd serve the rest of their term and then it's for next election?
So under the bill, they would, it's effective on the effective date of the bill, which is October 1st. If you're serving both on the Central Committee and in a public office, you would have to resign one. Presumably they would resign from the Central Committee.
Okay.
And so they would have, if we pass this bill, let's say by April 10th, then they have some ample notice to figure out some other arrangements. That's a very good question. Delegate Fair.
Thank you. I was looking over the bill and I was served on our Central Committee and had to resign when I decided that I was going to run for office instead of running for Central Committee in 2018. Or in 2018, I ran for a different office. And I appreciate the spirit of the bill, and I certainly appreciate Delegate Griffith's comments, because it does have unintended consequences. The Democrats, contrary to popular belief, the Democrats also struggle with filling all of their Central Committee seats for each election to find folks to fill into these roles. And I certainly can appreciate that perspective. The main concern that I've always had with people serving on us, as a former Central Committee member myself, with Central Committee members serving in both an elected position and as on their Central Committee, is you get this homogenous level of thought that seems to pervade the conversation, because you have one individual or a small group of individuals essentially controlling the entire party apparatus. I'll speak from my own perspective on this. I appreciated the fact that our Democratic Central Committee is not 100% in lockstep with me as an elected official or our other elected leaders throughout the city and state and county. And so what that helps is it provides, at least from my perspective, it provides a diversity of thought that really helps to push the conversation forward. You obviously don't see huge margins of differences of opinions, but you do get a lot of nuance out of having different people representing in those two different areas. And that would be one of the reasons why I certainly would consider supporting this legislation. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Fair. Very good point. Delegate Miller and then Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would there be any consideration for delaying that to the next election cycle? Central committees and having either like a special election or doing something. Do we know what possibilities exist if there are a large number of elected officials that would have to resign and then leave the central committees vacant? And I'm asking, it's such an incredibly important role. And they serve such an incredibly important role. But what I have found where we are is that most people don't understand the role of the Central Committee and the impact that it has from local all the way up, as far as especially in regard to if an office does become vacant. So is there any way to like streamline that? Because like I said, I think the public notification and how we backfill those positions, and then going forward and making sure that people know the importance of the role of the Central Committee. And trust me, we've tried, but it's very difficult.
Delegate Miller, I believe that the general practice is that to fill vacancies on central committees is that the remaining members of the central committee elect someone to fill the vacancy, although it's possible in some cases that the party rules have a different process.
Thank you, Delegate Miller. That's a good question and a fair point for consideration. I think I don't think we want to move it back another election cycle because we're in the first year of the cycle and that would take a few years. But I'm open to discussion of potentially pushing it back, although I do think that April to October is quite a bit of time to fill some vacancies. And I would hope that central committees would have been on notice about this issue, as we have been passing this bill several times. This is something that's eventually coming down the pike. If it's not this year, it's going to be next year, the year after that. So I would hope that folks would be on notice in terms of continuing to serve in two different roles. But that's something that we'll consider for sure. Let's continue the discussion. Delegate Feldmar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is something, I mean, I actually think this bill is pretty important, and I come from a county where we, I don't know that there's any specific prohibition, but we just have not really, at least within recent history, have not had elected officials also serving on the Central Committee. And honestly, it was a little bit of a surprise to me when in my last term, when I was representing Howard and Baltimore counties, and Baltimore County does have folks who are elected officials also serving on the Central Committee. It didn't really, I was surprised that happens. And it seems to me it's a matter of sort of, Central Committee members, I think their job is to focus on the party. And for elected officials, I think our job is to focus on the state or the county, the constituents we're elected to serve. And so from my perspective, it's about sort of, clear priorities and mission in your position. And to me, I think it's cleaner to not have someone serving in both of those roles. So I support this change.
Thank you, Delegate Feldmark. So two committee members, there is, I think, a reasonable question on the table about which I'm feeling neutral on, because I do think maybe October is enough time, but open to thoughts around potentially delaying I guess it would be the effective date of the bill. And I just want to have a very short discussion before we go to our last bill. Delegate Griffith.
I think with the opportunity maybe, and something I brought up in previous years on this bill, is if we put a compromise, at least if we could put a grandfather clause in, because this last election, the voters did speak and did in some cases elect people to both offices. So at the very least, if we could allow those individuals who were duly elected to finish their terms and have this then become law in 2026, that might be a way to find a compromise without taking away the voters' voices from this last election. And that gives obviously the people the chance to duly elect the next round of Central Committee members. I would think that would probably be a pretty, that'd be a compromise I could buy into.
Okay, thank you, delegates. I don't think we want to entertain grandfathering people in, as that would create a situation where some people are serving on both, some people are not, and that's over the next 3 years that someone would be serving in both. I do appreciate the suggestion, but I think there's openness to compromise around the effective start date. But I'm trying to get a sense on if that's something that folks feel strongly on, and if that's something that we're going to move forward to, that maybe the minority party feels is a reasonable compromise, or if not, we can move forward with the October date as is. Delegate Feldman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question about sort of how this would work as drafted, right? I think, Stan, you said that the central committees fill their own vacancies. Would that then, that would be for the remainder of this 4-year term? I guess I'm wondering if there's any opportunity, if this goes into effect, could central committee vacancies be on the ballot in 2024, or does that just disrupt things too much? I guess that's maybe a question for Mr. Demaritis more than for Stan. I'm just brainstorming. I don't know how disruptive that would be.
Yeah, I would defer to the board on that. Although I wouldn't think it would be a big deal. I mean, it's just adding additional office, and then you would reopen the filing deadline and so forth. And so I don't think it would be particularly onerous or add particular costs.
Well, I would say, yeah, it would definitely add another ballot. I guess it would be, we would have to establish like a cutoff date, things to make it so that we would know when the resignations. But if everyone had to resign or move forward by November, because by that time we would have to have it in November, then we would at least know the scope of it to place it on, because it would have to be on the May 14th election date. Well, luckily that's pushing it back to, a couple of weeks. So that helps this process a little bit here as well on that front there. I would say it's doable, without getting into it, but they would also, let me just put a caveat on that, which is there's a provision in the law, which basically says if there's a conflict between statutes or their bylaws, that bylaws supersede the statutes. And basically every central committee has bylaws on how to fill vacancies, whether, and so this would almost be, advisory that you would place this on the ballot at that point there, rather than mandatory. So you would have to kind of open up that can of worms a little bit as well.
Thank you, Mr. Demaritis. Delegate Miller.
I would be, that was one of my questions. I would be more supportive if it did go on the ballot, just like as voters did already make their choices, and then for us to just so quickly undo them. I'm not quite in favor of that. And then do we know overall how many people this does affect? Like how many vacancies are we talking, filling statewide? Do we have any numbers on what the impact will be?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I don't think we have specific numbers, but I don't think it's an overwhelming. We don't have any in Montgomery County, and we're probably have the largest central committee. I know that there are particular jurisdictions that have a few people that are serving on both, but this is not something we're expecting the overwhelming, majority of our central committees to overturn. Okay, I am not hearing any passionate pleas about pushing the date back. And I would be very concerned about us adding I think it's even more disruptive to add a whole other election onto 2024. So I'm not sure that we should entertain that. So unless I'm hearing a passionate plea for us to move back the start date, then I think that we are ready to vote this out. Unless there is anyone who's interested in holding for us to identify a later start date. Delegate Attar.
Madam Chair, I got cut off before. Did we say what that later start date would be?
We have not. I haven't heard anyone seriously entertain a later start date as of yet.
Okay.
Delegate Miller.
Okay, what would the later start be? I'm interested in knowing what that would be. But you know, if I'm the only one, I will certainly yield. That's fine.
I think we would be looking at just a couple months back. So if right now it's October, we're maybe looking at something around January 2024, the first quarter of next year. And the idea would be to give a couple more months for central committees to ready themselves and identify people to take over the position. Again, I think that their notice is right now on March 9th, actually. So folks should be talking to their central committees in case this bill does reach full passage, and this is the notice. However, if there's a strong plea and there's interest in moving it back to something around that time, we can entertain that. Otherwise, we'll move forward with this current date. All right, so I'd like to entertain a motion on the current bill. There are no amendments to it, HB 742.
Move favorable.
Do I have a second?
Madam Chair, I said second. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Awesome,
My
thank
Wi-Fi is
you.
going in and out.
It's been rough today. All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any further discussion on HB 742? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of HB 742, raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? All right, we have Delegate Griffith and Delegate Miller opposed. Thank you for the good discussion. We tried to come to a little bit of agreement, but you know, appreciate the conversation on HB 742. It moves forward favorably with no amendments. Finally, HB 1200. This bill, as it came in, established that compensation of election judges may not be less than $250 a day for each election day for an election judge, and during early voting, $50 for each, and during early voting, and then separately, $50 for each completed course of instruction. We do have amendments and a reprint that went out. Stan, if you could walk us through the amendments on HB 1200.
Sure. So on the first page, basically that's just clarifying language to make it clear that the county government does have to provide sufficient funding to meet the minimum compensation levels provided for in the bill, but that they could fund higher salaries if they chose to. On the second page, basically that language is just making a distinction between those who have previously served as an election judge and those who haven't. So the minimum level of $250 per day would apply to individuals who haven't previously served as an election judge. And then returning judges, so individuals who have served previously as an election judge, their compensation would be set at least $100 higher per day than for judges who are serving for the first time. And that's intended to be an incentive for people to return. And then the rest of the changes are just clarifying technical.
All right, thank you, Stan. So basically the county has to fund this, and we're distinguishing between those who are returning and giving them $100, almost like $100 bonus in a way, but $100 higher compensation. Is that both for per day and the courses? That's $100 additional, or for one of the other?
It's just $100 more per day. The course compensation stays at $50 regardless of whether you're coming back or it's your first time.
Got it. Thank you. Delegate Griffith and Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, with all the large number of unfunded mandates that we've imposed in our counties in recent years, and with the tightening economy, I certainly 100% support paying our election officials and volunteers more. But I can't right now support another unfunded mandate on the counties I represent. So that's why I'll be opposed.
All right, fair enough, Delegate Griffith. Delegate Miller.
I'm the same, especially looking at the disparate impact, especially like on Allegheny County, and what that's going to do for them, and Washington County. Those are going to be bigger lifts for those counties. So I'm the same as Delegate Griffin.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Miller. Since we do have a local election official on the line, Ms. Berry, is there anything that you would like to add to this conversation? I don't remember where you all came in on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for asking the question. Yes, we are in support of all facets of this bill. The only, we wish to have the $100 bonus, but the one thing that we would like to request is possibly making it a 50-50 cost split, or to have it something that is part of, being reimbursed the state 100%, just to kind of offset those costs.
Understood, and we appreciate that request, Ms. Berry. Are there any other comments before we vote on the amendments to this bill? Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the concern looking out for the county fiscal impact. It seems to me we're talking about a relatively small dollar amount. Stan, do we have an estimate on what this would be?
Right. So the bill as it introduced without the $100 bonus would be an additional 1.6 million just for collectively for all the counties. And then of course it would be more with the amendment. And as Delegate Miller pointed out, the impact varies depending on what the current compensation levels are in the counties.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Delegate Feldmark. Great question. Delegate Griffith and Delegate Miller. Or Miller Griffith. I don't know who was up first.
Doesn't matter. Just real quick, I just want to remind folks, certain jurisdictions in the state have huge budgets. Some of us have very, very, very small budgets. I know right now, in the counties I represent, and we're rubbing pennies together to try to cover some of these increases when it comes to inflation, when it comes to salaries and things we got to meet that aren't even state mandated. They're just things that have adjusted based upon the current economy. And then when you combine that with other mandates, things of that nature, we don't have a $6.3 billion budget. We have hundreds of thousands of, maybe a 100 million budget that's spread out over the entire service. So this hurts the smaller jurisdictions, even though it's a small physical note. Right now, every penny counts right now. And I don't disagree if you're a big county, but for a small county, it's very, very tough. So thank you.
Point taken, Delegate Griffith. I would just add that this is a bill where the cost is very proportionate. So those jurisdictions with the smaller budgets also have less people, less election judges, less polling locations. And also we're going to see less of the burden compared to the larger jurisdictions. But we will work on trying to get some additional numbers so that there can be a better estimate. Delegate Miller.
Yeah, I would definitely appreciate more knowing the numbers and knowing the percentage impact, because it's very different. Looking at Allegheny County with only $80 a day to go up to these amounts. Those are huge numbers as far as percentage increase. And even Washington County, like I said, they're at 150, and there's Hartford that's at 125 for just the regular election judges. So in some counties, these are very substantial numbers, and I understand the overall fiscal note, but really narrowing it down to the impact on the individual counties, I think is very important here when we're passing a statewide legislative mandate.
Delegate Miller, we do actually have some county by county numbers that the ELS was able to compile. So I can tell you with some specificity what it would be for individual counties. So for Allegheny County, $37,000 roughly. For Washington County, let me scroll down. Washington County, $33,600. And for most of the counties, it's something in that neighborhood of, as Delegate Wilkins was saying, for the larger counties, it's somewhat more. So for example, Montgomery County, $336,000. Frederick County, $117,000. Baltimore County, $323,000. Baltimore City, $247,000. Anne Arundel County, $276,000. But for, I think those were all of the ones that were over 100,000. For all the other counties, it's under that. And if there's any other specific counties that you want to ask about, I'm happy to provide that data.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Stan, are those numbers before or after the $100? I'm sorry to go out of order, Madam Chair. My apologies.
Yes, Delegate Fair.
My sincerest apologies. Is that with or without the $100 bonus?
That's without the $100 bonus. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Delegate Feldmark, is your hand up from before or?
No, actually, I just wanted to confirm if we had heard from Mako on this. I don't believe we did hear any opposition, but.
No, there was no opposition. Mako did not submit testimony.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and I think Ms. Berry had an additional comment, and then we'll move forward because I know the Education Subcommittee is meeting or is waiting on us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I will add is that this bill is desperately needed by the local boards of elections because we are having significant trouble recruiting election judges. And having some of the disparities among counties to how the local boards are compensating their election judges has also created some difficulties in that recruitment process. So this is just to supplement and try to make it more appealing to people to want to serve as election judges. Just the makeup of our election judges has changed significantly in the past few years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. I want to underscore that despite the cost of this, and we're looking at for some of these smaller counties and about $33,000, this is about making sure that we have sufficient staffing of our elections. And this is something that our local boards are asking for. So with that, I would like to entertain a motion on the amendments.
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendments to HB 1200? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the amendments to HB 1200, say aye or raise your hand. All right, all those opposed to the amendments. All right, Delegate Griffith and Delegate Miller opposed. The amendments pass, and let's look at HB 1200 as amended. May I have a motion?
Move favorable.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded. HB 1200 as amended. Any further discussion? Delegate Griffith.
Just one last brief comment, just to reemphasize my position. Again, I agree with everybody. This is extremely vital and important that this is done. However, if we feel it's this vital and important to be done, we should be funding it. So thank you.
Okay, comments noted. Delegate Griffith, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, it's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor of HB 1200 as amended, please say aye or raise your hand. All those opposed? Delegate Miller and Delegate Griffith in opposition. The ayes have it. HB 1200 passes out of subcommittee, favorable as amended. As Madam Speaker says, that ends the work at our desk for the day. We will likely meet perhaps at the same time next week. We may meet earlier as we're getting closer to crossover. We're going to be meeting even quicker and moving even quicker. So thank you for the great conversation and discussion today. Very much appreciate all the views that were shared. And I'll see you all, is it at 4 o'clock, 4:30 or 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock in the Appropriations Committee room. See you all.